Greetings, good people. Welcome to Who Knows It's Just Life, the podcast. I'm your host, Kyle. Thank you for fitting me into your day today. I'm very excited about today's episode. This episode is going to cover my trip to Ghana. I'm very, very thankful and appreciative of the opportunity to be there. I was there for about a week, and I'm very excited to share some of that with you. I kind of first want to give a little bit of a recap of how the trip even was possible. For one, my custody schedule opened up in a way that allowed me to have about a week where my son was with his mom, and that's not always normal. So I was thinking, okay, what can I do with this time? Usually it's like a travel thing, like with that amount of time, where's a place that I can go that typically feels out of reach, because with the travel time and time change, it feels like, it's a little bit too far or whatever. And I Googled it, and it was like, Bali, Dubai, all these places. And then I was like, well, hold up. Like, what's a place that's meaningful for me? And there's a long history of a connection between me and Ghana, starting with third grade. I did a project we studied Ghana, Mexico, and Japan. And Ghana just stuck with me, even just in the way that it does to a third grader. I just had this thing that I really liked Ghana. And then eventually I met Ghanaians in college, and they were beautiful people, had good relationships with Ghanaians just there. And just overall, I just kind of had this, love of Ghana. I remember rooting for Ghana in the World Cup, years ago. Asamoah and others are folks that stand out in my memory of just playing FIFA and all of that. And that's all very surface level stuff. But then as I got into being an adult, and with the 1619 project that came out and everything, Ghana has always been, or has tended to be, one of the leading African countries in terms of welcoming African Americans and anybody from the diaspora back to the country, and, allowing us to kind of embrace the culture, embrace African culture, and just as a way of, reconnecting with African roots and our ancestors, essentially. And so Ghana just became a top choice of where I would go. And as it so happens, there was a woman I worked with named Juliet Adai, who I worked with back a couple of jobs ago now. And she's Ghanaian, and she always said, hey, if you want to go to Ghana, let me know. It's the place to be, etc. And actually, some years ago, I was doing grad school work, and I was writing a paper, and part of it was about, whether or not this business should expand to another part of the world. And of course, I was doing something energy related because that's kind of my field. And I picked Ghana. I was like, should this company go into the Ghanaian market? And Juliet put me in touch with a gentleman named Fafa, who, is in the energy field there. And so anyway, I interviewed him for my MBA. And after that, he was like, hey, anytime, same thing. He was like, anytime you're in Ghana, or anytime you want to come to Ghana, let me know, we'll make it happen. And so I hit both of them up this summer when this idea kind of was starting to formulate for me. And true to form, they were both just super supportive, had beautiful recommendations, had lots of good feedback and ideas. Juliet put me on the right path initially in terms of just first of all, there's a direct flight, goes from Dulles to Accra, no stops, overnight, 10 hours, boom. You hopefully you sleep and then you wake up and you're there. And so that I definitely did that. That was beautiful. And that's there and back. They do it the same way coming home too. She mentioned going to Cape Coast, seeing the Elmina Cape Coast castles, which are very important. You'll hear more about that later. And then Fafa, he just took it to another level. He helped me get the visa. He hooked me up. He suggested that I rent a car and get a driver to, help me throughout the experience. And once I got there, and folks who have international traveling experience can probably relate to this from, I think this is not uncommon for a lot of other countries, but driving culture drastically is different in other parts of the world than in the United States. They do drive on the same side of the road as we do in the States, but goodness gracious, I would never have survived trying to navigate, using Google Maps, or I don't even just that would have just been a bad idea for me to try to drive there. So I appreciate Fafa for recommending that I go that route. And that led me to meeting Darlington, who was my driver, but at the end of the day became my friend, became a brother. And, he was such a key curator of my experience there. He obviously got me safely from place to place, but he tapped me into the food, some of the language, the sayings. We saw a football match together. When I say football, I mean, soccer for Americans, United Statesians. But yeah, we saw a football match, a Ghana Premier League football match. We actually saw the team that Asamoah played his last professional year was with the Lagos City Lions, I believe is what their team name is. Anyway, Darlington was, I can't speak highly enough about him. He's an excellent driver. He knows the music spots. I'll talk about that later. He was a translator, negotiator because there's always the Ghanaian price and then there's the foreigner price. So he's a negotiator, translator, tour guide. Just overall, just a wonderful companion to have during this trip. And Fafa also linked me with a friend of his, Kisora, who also was a beautiful help and tour guide and just an awesome person to partake in some of this journey with. She had experience in the tourism industry, works in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and just knows her way around the city. She's from the northern region of Ghana, and she's only been in Accra for about 4 years, and so she was really excited, having fairly recently experienced Accra for the first time, and that having been a cultural shock for her coming from the northern region. She was really excited to be part of my exposure to Accra for the first time, and so between all of these folks coming together, this trip was truly amazing. I'm eternally grateful for all these folks for making this trip possible. I also want to give a shout out to a former coworker of mine, also from a few jobs ago, Kofi Loco, who I hit up on LinkedIn. That hey, I'm in Ghana. So sorry to go back. Kofi and I worked together, as I said, years ago, and I hit him up on LinkedIn. I remembered he left the United States and went back to Ghana. I checked on LinkedIn. That was 10 years ago. And I hit him up. He remembered who I was. And we ended up getting lunch on my last day in Ghana. So it was beautiful to be able to link with him. And, so all I got to say is that this whole thing was a beautiful culmination of just people, connections, and just right people, right time type of thing. And a lot of what I did was at the recommendation of Fafa, Kasura, Darlington, and maybe a few others. And that kind of is in the spirit of what my Uncle Sean said, if you heard that episode, where it's like, when you travel, maybe have a loose framework of things you want to do, but ultimately give it up to being there. Like, let yourself be there and go with the flow a bit. And I'm so thankful that I was able to do that. And it was just an overall beautiful experience. So in terms of the episode, the theme that kept coming up for me is the idea of home. And so I recorded in Accra twice. Once on Monday night, which is just before I went to tour the castles. And that was a kind of a nice time to recap how I received Accra and how Accra received me kind of before that. And that castle tour is a pivotal moment because that's when you really see the history related to exactly why and how my ancestors got to the United States. And so I knew that was going to be a pivotal moment. So I took a moment to record a little bit of my thoughts before that trip, and then I also recorded later. So I'm going to take a pause here, and I'm just going to start playing a recording that I did kind of in that juncture period in my trip to Ghana. And I recorded it on my laptop in my Airbnb, which had some background noise. I think the AC was pumping, so I apologize for some of the lack of quality that I normally like to bring to the show, but hopefully the content and just the raw nature of me expressing some of these thoughts and feelings in this space is beneficial for the listening experience. Greetings, good people. I am broadcasting to you from Accra, Ghana. This first section is just my reflection of how my experience has been so far. And today is an interesting juncture in my trip, because tomorrow I will be going down to Cape Coast. And if anybody's familiar with Ghana and some of the history here, Cape Coast is where two of the castles, famous, infamous castles, are located. The castles that were involved in the slave trade. So the Elamina Castle and the Cape Coast Castle. So up until this point, I've been in Accra, and of course, it's the capital. It's the largest populated city in the country. It's also by the water. I picked up a nice Airbnb spot, which, I wasn't sure where I wanted to stay, but I found this Airbnb, or I found this guy on Airbnb who basically has, tiny houses, so to speak, and he just built these and plopped them into touristy areas, and he put two of them down here on Laboma Beach. And so I'm literally in a tiny house that's on bricks, that's on the sand of a beach, and it's quite awesome just to be able to walk out and just be at the beach. So I'm very blessed and happy to have this experience, first and foremost, in terms of the location and the time to do this. In terms of my reflections, I just wanted to give some brief thoughts on what it's like being here. I mean, a lot was talked about in 2019 about the year of return, 400 years after the first Africans were brought to U.S. shores, and so a lot. And Ghana's the leading country in Africa, from my understanding, in terms of welcoming Black Americans home, quote unquote. And I say quotes because I found, so I don't know what to call this episode really. I want to say something about home. I'm not sure how to word it, because it's a homegoing of sorts, but it's just layered and complex, at least for me. And I guess I should just say a disclaimer before I get any further, is that obviously the show is called Who Knows It's Just Life, which is the show about saying things as you understand them and know them right now, and that you'll disagree with them. Other people will disagree with them at some point, whatever. And so everything, obviously, I'm going to be saying here is based on my experience and my observations and what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, and just the humans I've been interacting with here. So it's not, it's not the capital T truth. It's just the truth of things through my lens, as is normal. I hope I don't need to say that, but if this is your first episode, that's the theme of the show. So anyway, so one thing that I wanted to reflect on, really, it hit me as I was in my first day here, that I've been to Black spaces in the Americas, the Caribbean, and there's definitely a common cultural thread in Black spaces, right? And granted, of course, there's a lot of diversity within Blackness and within how we present and how we create niches of culture anywhere around the world, right? But so you could be in New York, you could be in Cali, DC, Houston, Florida, Atlanta. These are just some places I can think of. New Orleans, some places that I've been, and so Blackness is there, but it's extremely unique in various locales that we've been in. And I've also been in DR most recently this year, so in other Caribbean countries, and of course DR has Spanish as well, so that's another layer. But when I got to Ghana, and within that first day, that first 24 hours being here, it made all that make sense, and it kind of rooted it, because it's like, oh, that thread, that thing that I see pumping through Blackness and Black spaces, this is like the source of that, and it's just so, it's just amazing and humbling and inspiring, really, to see that through all the trauma, all the everything that Black people have been through on the Western side of the world, or on the the American side of the world, that spirit has never been altered, hasn't been changed. It's adapted, sure, but there's something about the beauty, the creativity, the culture, the food, the just, there's something about it that rings true everywhere Blackness is. And me landing on the shores of Accra and seeing just what is the tip of the iceberg in terms of the entire continent, but just seeing that, and just it just felt like this is why that thread is there. This is at least like the part of the source of the fabric that makes this a thing, and it was just beautiful to see. It was like I said, awe-inspiring and all those things. Another thing I want to touch on is the idea of home. And I don't know that I had the expectation that it would be coming home, but I think I did have some kind of expectation of feeling maybe a strong connection to the people, to the land, and all that stuff. And that connection, that feeling is there. But culturally, there is literally an ocean between me and the people here, in terms of just like how things actually, just the flow of things, and just there's certain things that are very different. Like, and one thing that is well, for me, I'm very light skinned, I'm mixed, obviously, so I stand out. Like if I were a Black American, I might blend in a little bit more from a complexion standpoint. But they say they can easily pick out Black Americans because of obviously how we dress and whatever. So there's just differences, right? And what's interesting is that here there are so many different tribes, clans, things like that are just woven into the fabric of the country. And obviously, if you're familiar with the way Westerners, Europeans, I should say, drew territories in the Middle East and Africa and other places, they did so intentionally to combine ethnic groups and nationality, different, well, not necessarily nationalities, but different ethnic groups, different tribes and whatnot, to kind of make things a little bit not as smooth from a, to make things a little bit more challenging for any revolt or any kind of like challenge to the authority of Europeans. So, and Ghana's no exception. It's got Ashanti, it's got Ewe, it's got Go people, it's got and those are just the ones I can think of off the top of my head. But there's so many different ethnicities here. It is like mostly Christian. I think it's about 20% is Muslim. And some folks are using traditional faiths and spiritualities as well. The predominant languages here are not European languages, right? Like everybody, at least most people that have been through some education can speak English, and they do, but it's you can just tell by how things move here. It's just like everybody just way prefers whatever languages like that they're culturally brought up into, and whether it's Twi, whether it's, and I'm hoping I'm saying that right. I'm trying to learn some of the things there. Oh, that's another thing too. One thing about the languages here, I'm trying to learn some Twi. As you can say, even by me trying to pronounce the word, there are so many combinations of consonants that we don't really use in English. And so obviously, while the phonetic sounds are possible, for me to do, just the way my mouth is used to moving, it can be difficult to just pronounce things properly, in Twi and countless other languages, undoubtedly. But it's interesting just for me because I come here and I can speak English, and the folks here can speak English mostly too, with varying degrees of familiarity and fluency, but it you can just tell it's an automatic like like you're not from here, you don't really know and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, right? I mean that's true anywhere you go if you're not from there, right? But when you put that along with the whole not expectation, when you put that in the context of like going home, it's a funny feeling because it's like, well, if you go home, like you would feel like at home, you would feel at peace, you'd feel just comfortable in the culture and in the just, with the people and all that kind of stuff. And while, like I said earlier, there's a thread of blackness that is pumping through the diaspora everywhere it is, and that part is very familiar, right? At the same time, just that local element is very different, and it feels like it doesn't feel like I'm how do I word it? It doesn't feel like I'm a part of it, and that's true, right? I mean, I didn't grow up here, so it makes sense, right? There's truth to that, of course. I just think that it's again, just the context of Black Americans and like what is home, where is home. I know plenty of Black people. A lot of my friends are like, the U.S. is my home. Like, you can't tell me anything. Like, some have interest to go to Africa and like learn about Africa, just to kind of like do it. But some have zero interest in it. They're just like, I mean, yeah, I guess, yeah, we come here, but like, we come from there, but like, yeah, like, this is my home. Like, my ancestors are from here, and we built this country, blah blah blah, and they just feel like this is home. The U.S. is home, and I think that's true. And so, first of all, anybody that has that opinion can certainly have that opinion, and I think that's definitely true. I mean, we definitely have the birthright and the built right to claim the U.S. as home, right? But while in Ghana, I don't feel at home culturally, linguistically, things like that, in the United States, I don't feel at home in the sense that home is supposed to be a place of peace, security, belonging, things like that. I mean, yes, we have communities of Blackness where we do belong, and Black Americans, know exactly what that, like, having that neighborhood, having that community. Yes, we belong in those spaces, and we've carved out our culture and our spaces. But the United States has literally done the opposite of keeping us safe and letting us feel like we truly belong without fear of violence, relocation, improper education, healthcare, exploitation, all those types of things. So again, while it's our birthright and built right to be home in the United States, I think it's fair for us to just, fight for it to be home, which obviously has been an uphill battle the whole time, and it's a battle we continue to fight. But I don't think it's wrong for folks to look elsewhere at the same time. I think looking to Africa or other places of the diaspora that might be more amenable to us in terms of safety and security would be nice. I mean, obviously being here has its own safety risks because of the perceptions of, Americans and money and all those things. So that's not necessarily a given here either, but at least there's not the racist systemic threat to our bodies. So anyway, that's kind of what I've been sorting through a little bit, and I'm going to continue to sort through that. And one thing, so I was at so Darlington brought me to a venue, Mile 7 I think is the area, and I'll try to remember the name of the actual place, but he was like, he got so excited. He was like, "Oh, I want to take you to this place," and we got there, and we got there. Granted, this is a Sunday night. We got there relatively early. It was around 8:00 local time, and we got a couple of drinks. But we sat down. He had some friends. He wanted to have them come out too, so they came out, and it was great because. And I've been to other places like this too. I've been to like some Latino clubs and in Florida where it's like this. But at this place, they were playing like relatively old school music. I don't know how old Darlington is. I should ask him. But they were playing like more like classic, you know, Ghanaian artists, and I need to do my research and see exactly like when some of these songs were coming out. But they were playing stuff, and I was literally like, yo, every single one of these songs is like amazing. And Darlington was like in his groove. And the thing is, everybody knew the words to all the songs, right? And the crowd was very diverse in terms of age. Like there were people that were, you know, in their 40s, 50s. Then there were people that were like looked like they could have been in high school or college or something. And some people had their kids with them, and they left a little earlier. But like, it was just like, it's just beautiful to see so many generations enjoying this music, knowing this music, and the music changed. It evolved to other things. They played other genres. They actually played like some 80s music, and they played Paul Simon, which is hilarious because I know Paul Simon from when I was a kid listening to the concert in the park. So that's really funny. But yeah, so it was just beautiful to like see that. And so people like, so this venue, by the way, is a little bit more chill. It's not like a club. So by the way, it's outside. Everything's outside, right? Like, so there's tables, there's chairs, there's young ladies like taking orders for drinks and food and whatnot. And but there's also like the women who are like the street vendors who like carry products on their in baskets on top of their heads, and they just like walk around and get they make sales. So they were there too, walking through the thing. And you think of Americans, you think of United States stuff, like there's all these regulations, whatever. But like the women who are on the street like are literally walking up inside the venue, which again, it's outside, but it's still a venue, right? And they're just walking through like as if it was a street, and just selling whatever, popcorn or whatever. And the venue sells its own food, but like there's no restrictions about like them selling, which is just like, I don't know, I just like that kind of stuff. It's just like, let people do their thing. But anyway, like it was just a beautiful scene, and so everybody's at the tables and chairs, whatever, but you could just stand up and dance, and like there was some areas where it was like mostly space for dancing and whatnot, but these people were just chilling, like sitting in their chairs, whatever, for the most part, and that was cool. So at one point I stood up, and it occurred to me that I was looking out at this scene, seeing Black people in their homeland, in their ancestral land, multi-generational, singing songs in Twi, whatever other languages the songs were being sung in, I'm not sure. And the thought that came to my mind is that this is what they stole from me. This is what they stole from us. They didn't let us beat our drums, sing our songs, speak our languages, practice our spirituality, or anything like that. They had to try to kill all of that so that we would be subjugated in their system. And so I looked upon these folks dancing and singing, and I mean, it's like, it was just a beautiful, beautiful sight. Like so many people just the energy. I mean, the sound system sounded great. So like the music was pumping, and just, it was literally like a beautiful, beautiful scene. And so like I can't stress that enough. It's a beautiful scene, right? And I guess I just can't. So for me, it was a very melancholy feeling to then have the realization that this beautiful scene is part of what was stolen from me and from my ancestors. Because I don't know this language. I mean, I'm going to be listening to these artists when I go home, so I'm going to be listening to these artists. But, we don't come up learning a familiarity with this, which actually, so with the language piece, when we were in middle school, high school, whatever, we have to pick a language to learn. we can choose between Spanish, French, and other parts of the country might be a different one. Why in predominantly black places do they want us to learn these other colonizer languages? Why can't in predominantly black districts and schools, why can't we learn Tree? Did I say it? I keep trying to say it correctly. Tree, or Osa, or Zulu, or like there's a like why can't there be a couple of African languages available so that we could learn them? So that way we just get a little, that little flavor of another language that happens to be a language of our possible lineage or whatever. So that when we go here, we can at least say hello. Can I use the bathroom or whatever? Like just the basic stuff you learn when you're in grade school. Like why isn't that part of the school system so that there's a little bit more of a cultural nudge into that, right? Which brings me to the other point, which is that when I was in the water this morning, I went deep into the water. I didn't fully go in. The tide here is strong, and the waves are big. There's none of that. There's no stones to kind of break up the currents or anything like that here. So it's just big waves, and it's beautiful, powerful. So I was standing about waist deep in the water, in the ocean, and Hannah Nicole Jones's "Born on the Water" came to mind, and particularly when. So me and the kiddo listened to the audiobook and read the physical book, and I remember asking him what his favorite part was. And that book, if you're not familiar, it has several pages in the beginning about Africa and about how we lived in Africa. It's how market and music and cooking and all these different things, and how all of those things were beautiful and whatnot. And then it goes through enslavement and all the way up through like Civil War, civil rights, the rest of U.S. history. And he said that the first few pages were his favorite. And I was like, damn, of course they're your favorite. And so it's like his favorite part of the book was stolen from us in the process of enslavement, right? It was stolen from our ancestors. And not only that, that part of our history was not in the way I learned Black history. Black history for us started with slavery. So what would be my favorite part two, if it were to be the same as his, wasn't even in the story. So not only did you steal these pieces of who we were, who we are, not only did you steal these parts of who we are in the process of enslavement, you also prevented me from having the right to enjoy it, even academically, and even just from a place of study. And again, if we had the languages available to us in middle school and high school, we could just have just that little bit of a glimpse into the culture in terms of how you learn so much about a culture and how people think, how like, phrases, whatever, like it tells you so much about people and about the culture. So like if we had that exposure, we would be able to feel more included in the favorite part of the story. And on Sunday, I was watching Avery's favorite part of the story. And it was beautiful. It's a beautiful scene. And so I did have some sadness and melancholy in that moment. But I won't end there, because I'm also proud of the resiliency, the perseverance, the courage, the strength of my ancestors for doing what I said I recognized at the beginning of this recording, which is maintaining that African spirit wherever we've been. Because yes, there is still connection. I still feel connected to this place, these people. I might not be able to speak the language, but the connection is there. The familiarity is real. just seeing and hearing so many pieces of how blackness exists in the States and in the Caribbean, seeing it in its in its original form, at least as it's presented in Accra. Such a beautiful thing. And I just want to give thanks to the ancestors for persevering and keeping that spirit running through our veins, running through our culture, running through our existence. So I guess they didn't really steal it. They stole that particular version of it. They stole our ability to speak the language to this point. But they didn't steal our hearts and our souls and our minds, our creativity. They couldn't conquer that. And I'm so proud of our people for surviving and thriving through all that we've endured on the other side of the world. Well, when I say, I mean, I'm here, so when I say the other side of the world, I mean the Americas, the Caribbean. You know, on that side of the world, there's been so much that we've been through. But I'm proud and grateful that we were not killed. Our spirit, our culture, we just created an American version of it. We created a New Orleans version of it. We created a New York version of it. We created a LA version of it, a St. Lucia version of it. We created a Bahia, Brazil version of it. We created, a Belize version of it. We created a Guyanese version of it. What I'm seeing here in Accra, Ghana, has endured. We brought it with us. They couldn't conquer it out of us. They couldn't beat it out of us or anything. They couldn't extract it. They couldn't exploit it out of us. We are here. We are connected. And if there's one thing that proves it, I have to end on this. When I was in the airport, I saw a group of folks wearing Black Alley Black Alley hoodies. And for those who aren't familiar, Black Alley is a go-go band in DC. And I love go-go. I love Black Alley. I've been a fan of them for years. And I'd go up and talk to them. Hey, are you Black Alley? And they're like, yeah, like we're about to do this whole journey through Ghana. And I was like, no way. And so they were literally on my flight to Ghana, and they are leaving a day after me. And so they're doing some concerts. They had a whole itinerary of a bunch of things. And actually, we'll both be in Cape Coast tomorrow at the same time. I will be doing my own thing, but I may run into them. I don't know. But it was just amazing to run into them. And I think it's so funny to me because go-go, particularly, again, our music, there's Africanness in all of our music, right? But go-go in particular is so percussive, call and response, the live experience, the interaction with the crowd. In my studies and in my understanding of like African cultures and things of that nature, I argue that is one of the most African musical art forms that is in the United States. I would argue that, just in terms of like what I just said. So when Darlington and I were at the venue last night, and I recorded it, I on my watch, I recorded it, and so hopefully I can like find the song and play it. But there are 2 songs in a row that came on, and I kid you not, those 2 songs literally had a go-go kick drum rhythm to it. And I was just like, this is I knew, I had a feeling. I was just like, yes, like this confirms what I thought. Like go-go just felt so like, and here it was here in Accra, like, and everybody here is just dancing, they're singing the words. You know, I'm assuming the language spoken in the song was Tree, but regardless of that, is a go-go beat. And I was like, I was so excited. I told Darlington, I was like, yo, this is a go-go beat. This is a beat that is common in DC in this music called go-go, and this is the same music of the band that I saw who was here right now, and to me, that just that's I place my pride in our people, in that connection. The fact that our DC go-go is just like, I can hear it here in Accra. And I know that's just one example, but for me, that was just the most poignant, and I mean, it's up my alley because it's music, but it's just the most poignant evidence that they didn't steal anything. We have conquered despite the attempts of conquering us. And so I'm very proud and very grateful for the ancestors for doing what they did, for enduring what they had to endure, so that I could be here along with Black Alley, and so that I could be in a space where I could hear the related rhythms of DC and hear the evidence that we've survived, we're thriving, and we are connected. We are one people. We are all part of this diaspora of African people. And that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Okay. I will sign off for now. The next time you hear from me will be after the tour of Cape Coast. Peace. Greetings, good people. I'm recording this on my last night here in Ghana, and I will have most of the day tomorrow. I fly out pretty much at midnight local time, which is really like 8 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow night, and I'll arrive early the next morning. But I just wanted to take a moment to provide some updates. I went to the Elmina and Cape Coast castles yesterday. Yesterday was a journey for sure. Emotionally and physically, it was a 2-hour, 40-minute drive from Accra to the Cape Coast, and it's the distance between Baltimore and Philly, but it took almost twice as long because, or I don't know, maybe not quite twice as long, but it took like an extra hour because it's a one lane each way, potholes and speed bumps in the towns and stuff like that. So you have to wait to pass trucks and whatnot. It was definitely a stressful drive for Darlington. I really appreciate his diligent and careful driving, getting us there safely. Yeah, it was just a very full day, really. I think. Oh, one thing also about the trip down there, per Fafa's recommendation, we left at like 4:45 in the morning from Accra, because as and he was correct. By the time it was 5:30, there was already traffic in Accra ish. I guess we're kind of out towards Kasoa, I believe the town is, right outside of here. So I mean, traffic was already piling up by like 5:30. So he was definitely right to leave early. So we got to Cape Coast around 7:25, 7:30 ish. So Cape Coast Castle was really hit me. It hit me hard. One thing that was just awkward up front was that I was only one of, I think, 5 descendants who were present for the tour, and there were probably closer to 15 people present. A couple folks were like the drivers or like Ghanaian folks, helping folks get there, which is understandable, of course. But the rest were Europeans, and I couldn't tell where they were from exactly. I really wasn't paying that much attention to them, but they weren't speaking English, so I don't know where they were from. But I just thought that was interesting, and I kind of just, I didn't allow myself to get distracted by them necessarily. Like I said, I don't know. I didn't even try to figure out what language they were coming from or whatever. Like ordinarily, I would try to figure out where folks are from, but I didn't care. But I still thought that dynamic. I noticed that dynamic and thought it was interesting. And yeah, I on Instagram, I'm gonna just post pictures of the outside of the castle. I took pictures of the inside. I took pictures of the dungeons. I took pictures of the the governor's quarters, and where the white people lived and stuff like that, and where their meals were prepared and stuff like that. So I have pictures of inside, which I'll share with friends and family, but I don't want to put them on the internet. And maybe I'll change my mind on this, but I kind of just want to let that be my experience, even though, I mean, you can find the footage if you want to see it, but I don't know. I just don't want to share it. Something about just the personal experience of being there, and my capturing of it. I just want to keep that close for right now. The tour starts with a brief history, and I have some footage from the tour, and I have Richard's permission to use some of it, so I'll probably play some of it. So I will play some of it in here. The tour starts with a history of sort of a history of the world, but obviously it's not comprehensive. But it starts with a world snapshot leading up to slavery, and it starts with, pretty much in the 15th century, with Europe trying to gain some kind of authority and security in its power and its wealth, realizing that the Arabs control the trades along the Sahara and with Indians in India, of course. And there is a slave trade that already exists in the northeastern part of Africa and in other places. This slavery is markedly different than the slavery that would become the slavery in the Americas. But anyway, so he recaps the history beautifully, and there was plenty that I did not know. And what I did know, he was right on with what I was familiar with. But I learned a ton. And the very first place we went was the male dungeon, and when we all got assembled in there, he cut the light off, and it was dark, insanely dark. And this was a bright sunny day. This was like 8:30 in the morning, a bright sunny day. and the sun was even on the side of the sun was on the side of the sky that was coming through the only two windows, tiny windows for the room. And later I asked Richard if I could go back and take a picture with the lights off, because he kept the lights off quickly, understandably, because it was uncomfortable as dark as it was. But so I have a picture of the lights on and the lights off, and just that room was tough for me. Just the history, knowing what we were standing on and what happened there for as long as it did, and knowing the duration of how long folks were down there, which was up to 3 months, and the conditions. Yeah, it's you learn, you read about it in a book, but then when you're there and you're in this space and you can see the walls and the floor and the ceiling and where the chains were, and it's different. And then we went to some of the other. So this was the first male dungeon. There were, I think, 5 total. The others were a little bit more, I don't know about spacious, but they had a little bit more airflow, because they weren't on the edge of the building, and they had a little bit more sunlight and things like that. And it's just insane to even think, like, oh, that one would have been a little bit better. Like, there's no such thing as better. Like, there's just no the tour guide at the Elmina Castle was like, as soon as you were a captive, your experience in your life, your experiences were pain and suffering, and it didn't matter if you were in which dungeon you were in. It didn't freaking matter. Like, and then they showed us several other areas. They showed us the female dungeon. They showed us the condemned area, where if any folks tried to rebel, tried to fight back, they would chain up to 10 together in a room that was completely black, no food, no water, and they were left there until they died. And then they were used as an exhibition to anybody else still alive, in the main chamber, in the main dungeons, as an example. They had, in the chamber for women, they had another chamber for women who denied the sexual advances of the Europeans. And for Cape Coast Castle, that was mostly British. It was originally built by, I want to say, the Dutch, and I have a picture of the whole chronology of the the European ownership of the castle and operations of the castle. But from 1664 up until the end of their rule, it was under British control. The Cape Coast Castle was under British control. So this is Britain. And yeah, like the women that were that denied sexual, prevented their own rape, they were made an example of as well. I don't want to get too heavy into this. It was heavy. It was heavy. I'll jump ahead to Elmina Castle, which also was heavy hitting. This one was particularly gross because this one, by the way, was split in time between the Portuguese and the Dutch. This one was just like, you can't deny the fact that rape took place, because the governor's, first of all, the governor had 3 rooms in the Elmina Castle. The bedroom was large, maybe not as large as one of the dungeons, but large, and it had several windows. Plus, there were 2 living rooms. It was just obviously like just a plethora of space. And then there's also a stairwell that came directly up from the female captive's dungeon. And there was also a place upon which he could stand and look at the female captives and pick one out, basically. And then there were literally stairs right there to bring, and they would wash her up and bring her up. And I mean, it's literally, they literally thought of this and built it into the structure. It's just like, you can't deny it, and it's just gut-wrenching. Both castles had churches literally above the dungeons. In the Cape Coast Castle, it was an Anglican church. In the Elmina Castle, it was the First Catholic Church. So here I'm going to cut in some of the audio from the Cape Coast tour. And this is these vocals are from Richard, who was our tour guide. I did get his verbal permission to use his voice on the show. So here is Richard describing the churches above the dungeons.
Church above a slave dungeon. Monday through to Saturday, the British had slaves, bought captives, held them in dungeons. Sundays, they had church services above them. That is why in Ghana, some people commonly say the ship that brought Bible took captives up. And first president of Kenya, Jomo Kenyatta, once said, when the missionaries arrived, Africans had land, they had Bible. They taught us how to pray with our eyes closed. When we open our eyes, they had land, we had the Bible. Society for the propagation of the gospel. Society for the propagation of the gospel. SPG Church, First Church of England in the country. Church of England is now Anglican. Anglican churches are all over Ghana. Methodist Church Ghana started from this courtyard. Catholic Ghana started from Elmina Castle. Presbyterian Church Ghana started from Christiansburg in Accra. On the male slave dungeon. This is the spy who we saw from the male dungeon, the third chamber. You recall. Below this is where the feces, the urine, the vomit was held. So the minister of the gospel like Philip Kwaku passing for a service on a Sunday morning had something like leftover bread. He could just drop it down to the school. Captives in the dungeons will struggle for the piece of bread after you pass into the church and preach the gospel. Possibly captives in the dungeons had them here in the church singing, preaching, but they couldn't come out to join them worship. Because the Bible says, by hell, there's no way you could go to heaven. Now I said earlier, ironically, heaven up here, hell down. Let's go to heaven, paradise.
So when Richard mentions heaven and paradise, he's referring to our next stop on the tour, which was the governor's bedroom. What I didn't mention in my recap of the male dungeons was that just that first dungeon alone, and I think there were 5 total, that first dungeon held up to 200 men, and it was not very big. This governor's bedroom was larger than that first dungeon, and it had like 9 windows that were very tall, I think bay windows, constantly open, sea breeze, beautiful view. You know, in the day, I mean, that, and even now, like, it was still a beautiful view of the ocean and whatnot. Like, that is very much, you know, a paradise of sorts. I kept that in there because it reminds me of a contemporary idea of heaven and paradise that we supplant into black and brown spaces despite poverty and desperate situations there. Like places like Jamaica comes to mind, and other places where we carve out heaven and paradise despite some of those challenges. So that kind of struck me in a couple of ways. But I digress. I'm going to jump to Richard describing to us the door of no return at the Cape Coast Castle.
This is the famous door of no return. Door of no return. Final exit point for some of our ancestors. Door of no return because some of our ancestors were first migrated to the New World through this door and never came back, never returned. Door of no return because they went through this door and we lost contact with them forever. Door of no return because the moment one passed through this door, either he or she died on the way or arrived. In both situations, he or she never returned. They went to this door and they lost everything as Africans. Lost their names, cultures, families, religions, languages. They even lost their dignities as human beings. No, most of them died. Very most of them died. We are going to go to the door of no return, but I promise you, we are going to return. Now that day, August 1, 1998, when the jinx of door of no return got broken, Ghanaians named the other side Door of Return, inviting our brothers and sisters in the diaspora, African Americans, African Europeans, African Caribbeans, and all others to come back to Africa to learn the history, to help develop the continent. Because the continent of Africa is not only for those of us living here, but also for millions of people, especially those with African descent, scattered all over the world. That is why when you return, you will see on the wall boldly pasted Akwa. Now, Akwa means welcome, so you are all welcome.
Okay, I'm going to jump back to footage of me recording from Ghana and just expressing the Akwaba sign and some of the thoughts and reflections after walking through the door of return. There's a sign in the Cape Coast Castle that says Akwaba, which means welcome. And on the other side of the door of no return, they have the door of return. And, I walked through it. After the castle tours, I really started continuing my thinking around home. And, things occurred to me. Things happened actually over the weekend, but they happened more yesterday and today, which helped the incidents from my prior days here bubble up to the surface, and which is what I've heard too. But Ghanaians literally do welcome us here as Black Americans and anybody of the diaspora really. We are welcome, and there's a sign that welcomes us in Cape Coast, and there's just plenty of indications of our being welcome here. And one thing I very much appreciate is Darlington, my driver. He brought me to his own home, and he introduced me to his wife and his sister, and then he brought me to his childhood home and introduced me to some of his brothers and longtime friends. And one friend in particular said, welcome, feel at home here. And I heard that again Tuesday, feel at home here, from a stranger. It was just a man that we came across, whatever, and he was like, oh, where are you from? Da, 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 da. Feel at home here. And that helped me realize that home is a choice. We choose where home is. If you want to choose that the U.S. is your home, do that. That's beautiful. That's our birthright and built right to claim that. If you want to return to Ghana or anywhere else in the continent and find home there, do that. If you want to do both or whatever it is, like home is literally what we make it. And I think folks know that's true. I've heard it and I've known it's true, but in this journey and really calling it into question, I've been forced to work through that, and I think the cultural discomfort I felt getting here was real and true, but it also just takes more time and effort to be here, learn more, be here longer. And people are asking me, do you like itching to get home? Are you like, do you want to stay longer? I definitely want to stay longer. I mean, I miss my kid. I miss my friends and family who I know, and I miss the people I love, and I miss my own bed, things like that, right? But like, I don't want to leave. There's so much to do, and there's so much more to see and experience, even just in Accra, but also like in all the other regions of this country. So much else to see and do. And so I'm left with a positive feeling of feeling welcome here. And I'm also left with a feeling of motivation to make this part of my home. The people, the land, the food, the culture are all beautiful. And they welcome it. And I appreciate that. And I want to take them up on it. And I will continue my journey and continue to find places that feel like home and make them so. So on the eve of my flight back to the United States, I'm kind of left with the question, am I flying back home? Or am I flying away from home? But I think that both can be true, right? The United States, the DC area, that's the home I was born into. And I know it well. And I have so many people I love there. So I appreciate it for the home that it is for me. But I also appreciate the home I felt here. And so I see it both ways, and that both can be home.
Well, that's the episode. One thing I forgot to mention is my songs I'm rocking to. I would say that while I was in Ghana, I was definitely rocking to Kitty, the song Champagne. He's a Ghanaian artist. And also I was loving Burna Boy, his latest album. The song that particularly struck me on my last night was called It's Plenty. And I was just in a beautiful venue surrounded by Fafa, Kasora, Darlington. I was just watching Avery's favorite part of the story on my night of departure. And I shed some tears because it was a journey. I want to give thanks to the ancestors and to all those who made this trip possible. And I want to thank you for listening. As always, you can get at me on Instagram at RealDadult. That's RealDadult. I look forward to hearing your feedback on this episode or any prior episodes or any ideas you have on future episodes. Hope to catch you here next time. Until then, be safe, be well, peace.
It's Just Life podcast is recorded, produced, and edited by me. All thoughts and views expressed on the show represent that moment in time. Participants have the right to be wrong, learn, and reshape their ideas as the journey through life continues. Please remember to like this episode. If you haven't already, subscribe to the show on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever